Hello, New Zealand. I'm Bob McCoskrie. Welcome to Straight Talk. This is episode number 88. Tonight we discuss, should we be making it easier or harder for people to vote in our general elections? A new poll suggests that the current government won't win the next election, so therefore there'll be a one-term government. Really? And can they turn it around? Is the new transgender and sports policy a win, or is it just a distraction from the bigger issues? And is working from home a right or a privilege? We'll also discuss the Gaza situation and question whether the media coverage is giving us the full picture. But let's introduce the panel tonight. And, well, I don't know who did the roster, but it definitely is adult human males tonight. So it's going to be a short show by the time we all do our grunts. We'll probably be out of here by about 15:15. So, Simon, thank you for hosting last week. Apparently it was the highest rating show of the year, so well done.
Yeah, well, one of your daughters even opined in great support of the change. So I suppose she's out flatting now.
Exactly right. Thank you. To your left is Rodney Hyde, deep in the south, where it must be absolutely freezing. Is it, Rodney?
No, it's been surprisingly mild. We've had some cold nights, but this is a very mild winter, and the ski fields are suffering.
Okay, don't rub it in. You're on one of those school trips supervising the kids on the ski slopes, are you? Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, okay. Slightly warmer north of you, that's Ashley Church. How are you, Ashley?
I'm good, Bob, but I've been playing around with lighting, and I'm just looking at the moment, and I look like I could illuminate Eden Park, an All Black game at the moment. So clearly I'm going to have to fix that between now and the next show.
It's the brightest I've ever seen you, Ashley.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And
I thought it was a halo.
and it's going to be a lot of sledging tonight, I can tell. And to your right is Peter Williams, also deep in the south. How are you, Peter?
I'm very good, thanks, Bob. Yes, very mild winter down here. It was -6 a few mornings last week, but it's +6 this morning. So we're on our way to spring.
Well, I'd just like you to know that in Indianapolis, it was 100 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 35 degrees Celsius. So it's quite pleasant being able to snuggle up in bed, being back in New Zealand, that's for sure.
We don't need to know that, Bob. Thanks.
Anyway, okay, TMI. Video of the week. Video of the week, Peter, you're really going to enjoy this one. At just 29 years old, Scotty Scheffler, he's already secured a place amongst golf's most dominant and decorated athletes. 4 major championships, the number 1 ranking, and he recently won the British Open. But when he went to the media conference, he didn't point to the leaderboard, he pointed to home. This is what he said after the British Open.
I mean, I love playing golf. I love being able to compete. I love living out my dreams. I love being a father. I love being able to take care of my son. I love being able to provide for my family out here playing golf. And, every day when I wake up early to go put in the work, my wife thanks me for going out and working so hard. And when I get home, I try and thank her every day for taking care of our son. It's just, that's why I talk about families being my priority, because it really is. I'm blessed to be able to come out here and play golf, but if my golf ever started affecting my home life, or it ever affected the relationship I have with my wife or with my son, that's going to be the last day that I play out here for a living. This is not the be all end all. This is not the most important thing in my life. And that's why I wrestle with, why is this so important to me? Because I would much rather be a great father than I would be a great golfer. That at the end of the day, that's what's more important to me.
Yeah, great stuff. Now, related to that, favorite sports to watch. Peter, I'm interested in your comment on this one, actually. So Stuff did a poll online, and this was the sports that we love to watch. Rugby World Cup way out in front, followed by the football, the men's football and the Olympics. And then the US Masters is 4th down. And then, unfortunately, FIFA World Cup for women and Rugby World Cup for women. Wimbledon. Why is Wimbledon so low in the Commonwealth Games? I don't know. Is anybody surprised by those results?
Well, not at all. Wimbledon happens in the middle of the night, so it's never going to get a big audience in this country. Also, we don't have any decent tennis players. The Commonwealth Games are the ultimate woke fest. They're just an appalling sports festival now, and I say this as somebody who's been to about 6 or 7 of them. And as for Women's World Cups, well, I know we've got an all-male panel tonight, but the commercial reality of women's sports all around the planet is that they are not commercial and not especially popular. End of story. Never
you
have
only
been,
said-
frankly, never will.
And you only said that because it's only guys on the panel, eh?
No, not at all. I would have said it if the lovely Sue had been here or Mel or whatever. I would not have been scared to say that out loud
No.
in front of them.
No, although there was a big crowd at the Euro
The only thing
final.
that's missing is there's no America's Cup.
Yeah, it happens so rarely. That's why we sort of miss it when it actually happens. Right, we've got lots to talk about, team, so let's get straight into it. And I do just want to cover one extra topic that wasn't on the original list, and it's because one of our panellists featured on the 6 o'clock news last night. And I know that because the 3 people who watched the news actually told me. Now, it's about the Gaza issue, and according to a report on Stuff, more than 100 charity and human rights groups said that Israel is blocking food going into Gaza, ongoing military offensive, and Palestinians, they're pushing them towards starvation. The head of the World Health Organization said Gaza is witnessing a deadly surge in malnutrition and related disease, and that a large proportion of its 2 million people are starving. Hamas has said it will only release the remaining 50 hostages it holds, around 20 of them believed to be alive, so they've killed the other 30, unless there's a ceasefire and an Israeli withdrawal. Now, just before I play this clip from the news, Ashley, I gave that away. Ashley Church was the featured speaker on the news, which you will see in just a minute, a big, long, extensive coverage of his what he said. Ashley, do you just want to give us a lead and how did this interview actually arise? Did they call the wrong number or something?
Yeah, well, got rid of a long list and I was the only one home. Look, Bob, I don't typically struggle to get media coverage on a broad range of sort of political and property related issues. I can sort of generally get a front page on property if a topic's important to me. But on Israel, it's crickets. And, when I set along with David Kerman and the Trotters, set up the Israel Institute 4 or 5 years ago, part of the remit of that organisation was basically to get a balance of coverage on issues surrounding Israel. And it was interesting because we tried that for about a year, just could not make any headway whatsoever, simply couldn't get any coverage from any of the mainstream media outlets. So we pretty much gave up and have used social media since then. So you can imagine my surprise yesterday when I got a text from TV3 saying, would you like to talk about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza? And of course I said yes. And within about an hour, I was on a Zoom call with the journalist who, to be fair to her, conducted a very good call. She seemed engaged and interested. We talked for sort of 10 or 12 minutes. And I acquainted her with the key facts of that crisis, which were that Israel is not holding up humanitarian aid. In fact, 96 truckloads of aid have gone through in the last little while and are sitting on the Gaza side of the border in Kerem Shalom, and that the fact that the aid's not getting to the Palestinians themselves is entirely the fault of the UN, who either through intransigence or deliberately have decided that they're not going to distribute it. And the main reason that they're giving is that they want to use Hamas, get this, as the police escort for this stuff. And of course, when that's happened in the past, Hamas have either stolen the humanitarian aid and shot Palestinians who've tried to access it. Anyway, so long story short, gave her this information and she took that away, and I thought, this is going to be great. We're going to get some balanced coverage in tonight's news. So I watched it. I think in that 10 or 12-minute conversation, I got literally 10 seconds, 42 words. And following on from that, there were 4 speakers for the other side of the debate. One of them was Luxon, so you can disregard that because he's out of his depth in this issue. But the other 3 were all basically pushing the genocide, war crimes drum, and were given extensive time to in each case to cover their position. So I came away from it, and I should have known better. But I came away feeling a little bit naive and really pretty disappointed, and looked at it and sort of assumed that, well, probably then the fact that I even got a call was the fact that they've now changed ownership. Sky owns them and has maybe given them a kick up the jacksie and some indication that they need to be a little bit more balanced, and this is their response to that. But anyway, that's the background to what you're about to show.
Okay, and I think you were just the token gesture, which you'll see when we watch this very balanced report, and then I'm interested to get the other panelists just to comment on it. So I have just... I've cut it down. It was quite a long report, but I just wanted to show you the people that they went to for expert opinion, including our very own Ashley Church.
The UN says nearly 60,000 civilians have died so far, 70% of them women and children. Israel is under intense pressure to ease restrictions and blockades. But Israel and its supporters in New Zealand say the aid agencies are the problem.
The aid's not getting through, not because the Israelis are holding it up, but because it's being held up by UN agencies and other aid agencies on the Gaza side of the border.
In the past 24 hours, Israel says it's allowed aerial drops of aid to resume. But a senior UN official has warned they will not reverse the deepening starvation, and they are expensive, inefficient, and can even kill starving civilians. Condemnation is now coming from an increasing number of governments. Over 200 British MPs have signed a letter calling on the UK to follow France in recognising Palestine as a state. New Zealand won't recognise it as a state yet, but says it supports the establishment of a Palestinian state.
Our long-standing position is that it's a matter of when, not if. And for right here, right now, what we have to do and what many other countries in the West have been calling for is we need an immediate ceasefire.
I know this government's anxious to avoid criticism from the Trump administration. I think it's probably unavoidable. And politics is not about soft options. Sometimes you have to take options which are sensible and robust, even if it offends some traditional allies. America is not a disinterested player. It's committed to one side in this conflict. We are not.
The situation is now increasingly being described as a genocide. This UK surgeon just back from Gaza.
I would like our government to be recognising that there is a genocide being carried out, recognising there are multiple war crimes being committed daily.
Now it's time for us to go further and even press ahead of the pack, to be in the front line of nations, saying to Israel, listen, you're starving a population here.
Israeli scholars on genocide or Holocaust studies are virtually united in agreement that what is happening has to be classified as genocide.
All right, genocide, Holocaust, all of that. Simon, what's your thoughts having watched that?
The experts, other than Ashley, are completely wrong. Robert Patman's slowly, if not very fast, going off the reservation. I mean, if he says, he's not choosing the American or Israeli side, he's choosing to side with Islamic jihadist terrorists. Let's be really clear about what he's trying to say. The choice of Bob Carr, the man couldn't be any far more left and completely bought out by various regimes, including the CCP. But look, only a couple of really quick observations because I'm conscious of time, and there's some of the local things too. But have you noticed in the imagery, the women in particular, because there's very few men, the adults, particularly the women carrying the children, look very healthy compared to their children. And I know it can be seen as a very particular point, but if there's mass starvation, everyone starves. And if you've seen footage coming out of Africa and other places, and for me, that's been just striking. There's something orchestrated here, including the way that all the mainstream media are saying the same thing. There's no analysis, there's no real reporting. And one final point, I know it's not Ashley's report, but Stuff, as in the Stuff newspaper, put out a second op-ed last week with Phil Goff. Second time he's never mentioned October 7th and other context. And the second time I've tried to write a reply, which they've never published. So you're really just being fed a singular diet here. And maybe I should just finish where I should have actually started. What's happening in Gaza is terrible. It is a terrible conflict. No one, and myself included, is not trying to put icing on this or make it sound nice. It's awful, absolutely awful. But the way it's been reported, the way it's been misreported, the way that Western media, academics and others are just lapping up Islamic jihadist narratives is appalling. Because you'd think that Hamas has no guns, Bob. The only people who do shooting there is Israeli soldiers. I mean, yeah. Anyway, I've spoken too long as usual.
Okay, Peter, I mean, is this what we are getting from media coverage? I mean, it's the 4-1. I mean, that's what I would have expected on anything I get interviewed on. It's 4 against, and
well, that was an appallingly imbalanced report that Stuff put on last night, and Ashley's contribution, well, meritorious, just got lost, didn't it? It was extraordinary to have Patman and Bob Carr, Luxon not really knowing what he's talking about, and for the United Nations to be quoted as well. I mean, the United Nations, if I'm not mistaken, is the group that has been infiltrated by Hamas through their the United Nations Relief Works Agency, the UNRWA. So we can't really trust anything that the United Nations says when it comes to matters in Gaza. The definition of genocide, and this is from the United Nations, is that there is an intent on the part of one country to wipe out all or in part the people of another country. Now, that is not Israel's intention. So therefore, by definition, this cannot be a genocide. It's as simple and as straightforward as that. And if Hamas would let the food get through, then there would not be the ability for the Palestinians, for Hamas to put up the images of starving children. Having said that, I've never been there. I don't know what's really happening, and I don't know who to trust. Yeah. I heard a doctor from Doctors Without Borders on News Talk ZB this evening, and she maintains that it is Israel that's stopping the food getting through. She said she saw it with her own eyes, the IDF stopping food supplies getting through. So I don't know who to believe. And I guess unless we get to go to the border and see for ourselves what is happening, we can't really know the truth, except that after following this conflict for since 1967, you don't really trust too much what the Palestinian side says.
And they still think the two-state solution is a solution, which we
well,
know
that's pathetic. A two-state solution is just absolutely impossible, and out of the question.
Rodney, who do you believe?
Ashley. I've got complete faith and trust in Ashley Church on this matter, and all other matters too, by the way. Look, I watched that piece, and this is a trite thing to say, but it's particularly true in this case. You can't hate the media enough. For them to be having 10 minutes with Ashley explaining what is actually going on, and then to just boldly throw around the genocide word is absolutely disgusting. We hear a lot about hate speech. Well, that's hate speech writ large when you're accusing the Israelis of genocide. It's not true, of course. If the Israelis wanted to wipe out Gaza, they could do it in the morning. They could do it before anyone was awake, such as their military ability. Instead, they've been working around the clock to get food to the Palestinian people. What they will not allow is for the UN to funnel it through Hamas, which are using it to maintain their control, using aid as a method of control. The media know this, but they still run the narrative and accuse the Israelis of a genocide. Israelis who are losing men and women trying to protect civilians who have been put in harm's way by Hamas. Again, everyone knows this. You can pick that up with a casual glance at what's happening. Of course, it's tragic, but I don't for a second believe the babies that we saw were a consequence of Israeli actions or indeed starvation. I suspect they're children that are sick from other causes, and that the images have been carefully curated and fed up to the world's media to pluck at the heartstrings and run a narrative so the population in the West will be turned against Israel and will have silly old Chris Luxon giving succour to the terrorists. Can't hate them enough.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things is that there's so much facts and detail coming from the Hamas-run Ministry of Health or whatever they call it. as though you can actually trust that source of information. There was 2 comments here that I thought was just interesting that have come through from Kirstine, who says, maybe we, Ashley, and others ought to take a leaf out of David Seymour's playbook and tape record any interview with the media to stop, hopefully, the lying. And Victoria said, it would be good to see Ashley's full interview. That is something actually to consider, Ashley, is when you get interviews to record the whole thing.
I did. It was on a Zoom meeting. Google Meet, which I haven't normally used. Recorded the whole thing, and when it came through, it hadn't picked up my audio. It had picked up hers, but it hadn't picked up mine. So it was a write-off. But I did exactly that.
We'll give you a lesson. Okay. Okay. Right, let's move on. Closer to home. Should we make it easier to vote or harder to vote? The electoral amendment bill is going through. Apparently, during the last election, more than 100,000 people couldn't get their act into gear, and they enrolled on the day of voting. And in the 2 weeks before, almost 500,000 enrolled, even though the law actually says that the minute you qualify to be registered as an elector, in other words, turn 18, you have to register within 1 month. So I don't know how these people cope with passports and turning up to airports on time. Now, they're going to change the law. They say that you've basically got to enrol at least 13 days before election day. Apparently in Australia, it's 26 days. They're really mean. Postal requirements are going to be removed because nobody can trust the New Zealand Post anymore. And free food, drink or entertainment within 100 metres of a voting place is going to be an offence. That's mainly just for the benefit of Te Pāti Māori in Manurewa. Now, Deputy Prime Minister David Seymour, he called voters who enrol late drop kicks. Not looking at you, Simon. And justice officials say that closing enrolment ahead of advance voting could result in low turnout and reduced confidence in the electoral system. So is anybody feeling sorry for people who can't organise their life? Rodney, should we be making it harder or easier for people to vote?
Oh, making it much harder. This is a very significant change. When you're standing in a seat that's heavily contested, which I've had the pleasure of doing, you like to know who's in your voting catchment. And you like to be able to contact them, and you like to be able to persuade them to vote for you. This last-minute enrolment prevents that. It also allows for an extreme gerrymandering. A couple of thousand votes could easily affect a seat, many seats.
Yep.
It's not beyond the part of possibility to enroll a couple of thousand people in an electorate literally on the day from another electorate in order to swing the result. I heard Michael Bassett on the radio, and he suspects that's precisely what happened in Auckland Central with Chloe Swarbrick.
Oh, yes, for sure.
That you can just enrol people at the last minute.
Yep.
So there
University students.
There should be no last-minute enrolments. And to my mind, there should be only one day on which you vote. I hate this rolling maul called the election where you wander in when it suits you to vote. It should be a day that we come together as a nation and choose our government. Of course, we've had in the past opportunities for people who'd be overseas or unable to vote on a particular day to apply, but we don't make that easy, or we used to not make that easy, but there'd be a day on which you vote. And again, that was very important for campaigning because the sort of puff goes out of it and it dies with a whimper, not with a bang, because right up until voting day, it used to be that no votes had been cast. And now on those last few days, people aren't bothering even to campaign because the election's been decided by the people who already voted. I can't believe we've allowed that to happen. But there you go. That's my tuppence.
Okay, Simon, you've also campaigned on this. I know you've campaigned, 5 elections? And what I found interesting was that the complainers against these proposals say that it's left-wing voters that are going to be penalised the most. Why is that?
Well, they're playing into a dangerous stereotype that, somehow if you are Maori, Pacifica, Asian, young, in a lower socioeconomic sector, if you're reading the Attorney General's report, that somehow you're unable to go and register to vote. I think it's just actually downright insulting. In fact, I'm just writing a Substack, Bob. I shared a line with you today that these people, they say, are being disenfranchised. Of course, they're disenfranchising themselves. No one's really doing anything to them per se. But they don't seem, troubled to get the lotto ticket before the 7:30 closure, or the Ponsonby Elite to get their little Chardonnay before 9. There's a whole lot of things we're able to do. So it's basically rubbish. Very much what Rodney's saying about the dynamics before voting and how it can be manipulated. Paul Goldsmith, the minister, has also highlighted afterwards, it takes a long time to process special votes. The only slight point of disagreement, it's not something I would go to a hill to die on, is advanced voting. I'm quite relaxed about it. It's quite tense and tiring when you are a candidate, because you, on those last couple of weeks, are really trying to ramp up what is one day's activity across 12. But personally, it doesn't bother me too much. But if we do bring back one-day voting, I also suggest we follow Australia's lead and introduce democracy sausages that everyone gets a snarler as they go in to vote.
Well, I mean, do they turn up to the airport and say, oh, whoopsie, I've forgotten my passport. Could I enroll for my passport while I'm here at the airport waiting for my flight at the gate? I mean, it's kind of this assumption that nobody can get their life into order. Peter, are you, should we be making it easier, getting as many people in the voting booth as possible, or actually make it harder?
No, I think that everybody should remember that as citizens of this country, we have rights and we have duties. And one of the duties is to register, to vote. And I was just reading a piece tonight on this controversy, which suggests that it's actually very simple to do these days. You can do it using your phone. Everybody seems to have a smartphone these days. You can do it online, and it's a very quick and simple process. What has bothered me so much about these on-the-day registrations in the last, 2 elections, is that people can rock up without ID, tell somebody who they are, and get themselves on the electoral roll. That, to me, is just the ability for that to be rorted is just so obvious, it's ridiculous. So, frankly, it's your right, it's your responsibility, it's your duty to get your life organised 13 days beforehand and go to it. As far as Judith Collins or the Attorney General's report is concerned, I listened to a report on that tonight and I was quite incredulous. Surely Judith herself did not write that. That would be a Mandarin in the AG's office that's come up with this this nonsense about a loss of democracy. Judith herself surely could not have written that. I know that there has to be an Attorney General's Bill of Rights, Bill of Rights reconciliation against any kind of legislation. But I can't for the life of me believe that Judith herself would have used the kind of language that has emerged in this report. I might be wrong. Maybe she's having a bit of an internal fight inside the caucus. One final thing. I don't always agree with what David Seymour says, but on this one, he's absolutely right. If you can't register to vote, you are a dropkick.
Sorry, what did you call the person who wrote the report in Judith's office? Did you say Mandarin?
Oh, it's an old pommy term, isn't it? For somebody who works deep inside the bureaucracy.
I've never heard that one before, a Mandarin. Have you heard that, Simon? Did you have a Mandarin in your office?
Well, I wouldn't have called them a Mandarin, but I think it comes out of the sort of Cantonese and Chinese tradition of those bureaucrats. I mean, I don't know. You might call me a grapefruit or something at work. I don't know, but Peter's right.
I call you a lemon, Simon. Anyway, Ashley,
I think Peter, it's a little racist.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well. We're going
I would have said it's more fruity than racist.
The New Zealand Media Council is going to be on me like a ton of bricks now. Ashley, help me out here.
Yeah. So I agree with everything the guys have said, almost. But I do have a different view. And that is that I was moved, and Peter might be right. Collins herself may not have written it, but I actually was swayed to some degree by that. So here's the thing. So voting is a sacred right. It's part of our democracy. It's part of what makes us, New Zealand is the oldest universal democracy in the world. And that's a sacred tradition that we've upheld for a long time. And you have, as Peter so eloquently said, and I think Rodney did, it's both a right and an obligation. But here's the thing. we when we make these comments, we judge them by our own standard. We judge them by the standard that we as voters take to the voting booth, and the morals and the values and the aspirations that we hold. Those are not the only morals, aspirations, and values that people of New Zealand have. And there are other people who operate in a different way, who perhaps aren't quite as onto it as we are, and aren't as fastidious about making sure that things like warrant fitnesses and registrations on cars and passports are kept up to date, and indeed voting registration is completed, who are still entitled at the end of the day to a vote. Now, whether that should entitle them to a vote right up to the day of the vote itself, and I suspect probably the answer to that's no, and I agree with Simon that that's actually pretty loose. But I do wonder whether we need to take another hard look at this before we just decide to disenfranchise 100,000 people on the basis of the fact that that's not the way we do it, so therefore they should do it the same way that we do. That just seems to me to be pretty extreme, and I think Collins has got a point.
Can I just interrupt there too, Ashley? One of the things when we had strong parties and first past the post, and certainly a big thing for me in Epsom, is the political parties themselves would be getting voters registered.
Yeah, Peter Williams, getting them out to vote, I think he used to call it.
Well, getting them
Putting
registered,
them in a bus.
Getting them registered first and then getting them on the bus.
Yeah.
But you would actually canvass a street, and I mean, I did this endlessly, and you'd be making sure that the people that you were visiting were all registered to vote.
Yep.
Because it's a bit pointless asking them to vote for you if you're not registered. And the political parties themselves would do that. Likewise, the political parties would operate a system on the day of getting their voters to the voting booth.
Yep.
And again, this is a wonderful thing of democracy. So you're right, Ashley. But it was up to the elected organisation and the party organisation to ensure people were registered and that they got to the voting booth. And I myself found that, what's that word? It's that wonderful community thing, you know, where you're actually helping everyone and you're bringing everyone together and giving them an opportunity to vote. And I can distinctly remember ferrying people off to the polling booth who were going to vote against me.
And by the way, I said Peter Williams, I meant Mike Williams. Sorry, Peter.
Yeah.
Yes.
Former
president of the Labour Party, Big Tony. Yeah.
Okay, let's carry on. New political polling has, in the Dominion Post, or the Post in Wellington, they reckon that the government's heading towards a one-term in power because the majority think that the country is on the wrong track, and they believe it's time to give another party a go. 76% thought the economy was not so good or poor. Only 23% think the economy's good. 51% believe the country's on the wrong track. 38% believe the government deserved to be re-elected, but 48% said it was time to give another party a go. Now, that's slightly different to a Courier poll a couple of weeks ago, which had National slightly ahead. And then there was also an earlier one, the one from the Post shows Labour slightly ahead. Now, if you take the poll of polls, which is all the polls that we see, TV3, Radio New Zealand, TV1, Taxpayers Union, Talbot Mills, you can see there that it is pretty close. It's just that the right wing, the three parties, New Zealand First, ACT and National, added up together are doing better, probably because Te Pāti Maori is quite low. But are we really heading towards a one-term government? I might start with you, Simon. What do you think?
I think there's a risk of it. If you are the coalition, if you're National in particular, you're not sitting there comfortably. This is far too close. The second point I'd make, the Talbot Mills poll, like all polls, needs to be looked at, but we shouldn't forget they're the pollster to Labour. And remarkably somehow, Bob, it got leaked. And it got leaked, of course, because it was a satisfying message for the left to push, which leads me to my third point, because I was watching the news tonight. It's the penance that I pay of coming on to Straight Talk. I thought I'd better keep up with the news. But I noticed story after story from the legacy media was just simply to put the boot into the government. Now, that's not to say that this current government should be given a free ride, but they're getting the complete opposite. So it's about the booing of Luxon. It's about health issues. It's about the problems of removing the pay wage surcharges. Every opportunity to put the boot in the media are taking it. And I would say that should also be of concern. But if I was to make a very small distinction, it's concern, not worry. There's still a lot of runway to go. But as your poll of polls indicates, it still is quite close. But the coalition government are up against it. They are, facing a very hostile mainstream media. Yeah, I'll just leave it there.
Okay. Peter, what do you think?
Frankly, the National Party leadership is terrible. We've got arguably the most uninspiring Prime Minister this century. And remember, we had Bill English in charge for a short time. So that's saying something. The other thing that bothers me about what might happen next year is the influence of Te Pāti Māori. Their poll as a party is, hovering around 3%, 3.5%. I doubt very much they'll ever crack 5%, but they could win 7 electorate seats. I see today they're away already with their campaign for Ikaroa Rāwhiti, which is the only seat. That's the east coast of the North Island seat, which is the only one they don't currently hold. It's a Labour Party seat at the moment. So if they get 7 out of 7 and they start pushing the case to get more people on the Maori roll, there could be another Maori electorate come the 2029 election. If they win all 8 Maori seats, we're going to get into an overhang situation, a big overhang situation, which is going to mean that instead of needing just 60 seats or 50% of the combined party vote to govern, you're going to need possibly 63, which means more than 50%. And all of a sudden, the whole MMP idea is gone all skew with. And that's what bothers me. So I don't think, it could happen next year where 7 Te Pāti Māori seats, 7 Maori seats are won by Te Pāti Māori, and that could mean another huge overhang, which means that, instead of what we've got 124 at the moment, haven't we? Or is it 123 or 124? 123. So you need 62 at the moment. It may well mean that next year you're going to need 63 seats to get in, which means more than 50% of the combined party vote. And that, to me, is the biggest threat as far as the National Party is concerned, apart from their exceedingly lacklustre leader.
Rodney, the argument during the US presidential election was, well, I don't like Trump, but then again, look at the option. Do you really want that? For people who say, well, they don't like what the government's doing at the moment, or, think that they should be doing more, the option is pretty depressing, isn't it? So have we really got a choice?
It seems to me that we have absolutely no leadership. I can't think of one thing, even a small thing, that Christopher Luxon's, put his foot down on and saying, this is the way we're going, this is where we're heading. So the country's totally adrift. He really is a shocking leader, and it's because it's not just Luxon, it's his entire leadership team. They really are uninspiring, and times are tough, and there's a total lack of direction from our government. And I'm shocked that they can't see what the problem is. That said, I don't believe they're going to be a one-term government for precisely the reason that Peter Williams described, and that's Te Pāti Māori. Because on the margin, people aren't going to vote Labour because you're going to have the Maori Party in cabinet. And that's just going to drive votes straight into the arms of National New Zealand First and ACT. I personally believe that New Zealand First is going to do extremely well at the next election because Winston Peters is now starting to put distance between himself and Christopher Luxon. He's very good at sniffing out the issues that will give him the votes. He'll be dragging the Conservative votes off ACT and off National, and he'll be well placed. I'd just like to see him locked up, and not locked up, I'd like to see him locked up, yes. No, locked up into supporting National come the next election, because there'd be nothing more tragic than Winston Peters doing a not unheard of thing and deciding to support after the election Labour. he could block the Maori Party out, presumably, but that would be a tragedy too. So I think the best thing that Luxon's got going for him is the Party Maori, because they are toxic to Labour.
Yep. Ashley, I mean, the alternative's pretty scary. So is it really a one-term government?
Oh, no, probably not. But Rodney's right. And so it's not about one party. It's not about how national polling. It's about the combined support of the coalition, the three parties. And because as National's losing support, it's not losing it to Labour. It's losing it to New Zealand First or ACT. And it's interesting on that basis because there's a thing in polling called the law of statistical significance, which basically says if you've got a poll of 500 or 1,000 people in your cohort, that is within a margin of error, that is a representation of 5,000, 500,000, 5 million people to a very close proximity. And the reason that's important is because then when you look at things like the Clearwater poll a week or so back and the Taxpayers Union poll just before that, both of them showing the coalition comfortably being able to form a government. And then you see the Talbot Mills poll by the Labour polling agency showing this different result. You'd have to assume that in the context of this one poll, it's probably an outlier. And therefore, I wouldn't be panicking about this. And I'd also be making the observation that it's really easy halfway through the term of a government to express your dissatisfaction in a poll. You're much more likely to be more strategic and more surgical in the decisions that you make and the opinions that you make getting closer to an election, precisely for the reason that the guys have already indicated, because Te Pāti Māori, and let's not forget the Greens, are nutters. And as we start looking at that and we start determining what a government will look like, I think that's going to cause people to be a little bit more careful about how they might express their opinions. Having said all of that, the National Party are doing themselves no favours. And it's not just Luxon, it's the entire party. So to the extent that they are removing the wokeism that they were elected to remove by a large chunk of their supporter base, they're doing that not because they choose to, but because Peters is dragging them kicking and streaming to the right. And a really good example of that just from the last little while, in fact, I won't mention it because I think we're going to talk about it in the next item. But there's a couple of items recently where the national minister's position has clearly been one of being reluctantly drawn to a position because it's part of the coalition agreement, or because New Zealand First are putting the acid on them. So we've got an interesting 18 months ahead of us. But yeah, the big problem that they've got at the moment, and the one that's not allowing them to be 5 or 10% ahead, is the fact that Luxon and his team simply aren't firing.
Okay, good segue. Let's talk about those guidelines. Sport New Zealand has abandoned the guidelines which suggest that dudes can play in women's sports, basically because it doesn't align with the coalition agreement. Winston Peters threatened to cut funding for sporting codes if they allowed dudes to play in women's sports. I just want to show you the news coverage just before you comment on it. One News, of course, they only spoke to an advocate for dudes in women's sport. And so they went to someone called Kate Weatherly, who was an average men's downhill mountain bike racer, but then he became a she and is now dominating the elite women's field. So that's who the expert was, and this was their coverage.
Hitting the slopes and making history. Kate Weatherly is New Zealand's first transgender mountain bike champion.
I'm worried for young people who aren't going to be able to find their place in the world because they feel like that place for them is shrinking.
We are out to look after women, girls, to stand up for safety and to stand up for fairness. And they're the majority of the population and somebody has to defend them.
The problem is that they were so ideologically written around inclusion that there was no way that you could change the document. Therefore, the only option was, if we really cared about fairness, safety and the law and science, that they had to go.
The sporting bodies for rugby, netball and cricket have not responded to requests for comment, as concerns mount that people will be left out.
Trans and non-binary people across New Zealand are participating at about half the rate of the general population in sport.
Kate helped create the guidelines which had an overarching focus on inclusion. She says it's about making sure people can take part in the gender they identify with.
It ignores the fact that often community sport isn't even sex segregated to begin with. We're talking about local sporting clubs, community groups, where people are just really trying to have fun. They're not thinking about making it to the Olympics.
Everybody wants to go to the top team, whether it's soccer, whether it's rugby league, whether it's rugby, whether it's basketball. Always starts in community sports, so the rules should not be different.
Kate's hoping the change doesn't derail the work that's already being done.
Okay, it's always interesting when they bring in Inside Out. I'm sure your blood pressure went up when you saw that, Rodney. Just before you do comment, though, One News also had a little bit of coverage of it, and of course we got to see our best friend Raylene Castle.
Sport NZ Chief Executive Raylene Castle declined an interview, but in a statement said the government has directed Sport NZ to stop all work on the guiding principles for the inclusion of transgender people in community sport and remove them from our website. Sporting organisations will continue to make their own decisions on the participation of transgender people in community sport.
New Zealand should be a fair, inclusive, tolerant society, one that's accepting of people being who they are. And I think the best bodies to determine how that should be accommodated within sporting rules are the sporting bodies themselves.
It's a real shame to me when people who have positions of power use that to inflict pain on people who are just trying to live their day-to-day lives. They are rehashing old arguments, and ultimately it's about the control of what a woman is. And I'm already here to tell you, we know what we are. Just let us express ourselves and play with each other and have fun.
Okay, brilliant media coverage there, wasn't it? Now, interestingly enough, and I might come to you first, Peter, actually, because I read a Substack that you'd written where you said, look, at the end of the day, it's still up to each sporting code to make its own regulations anyway, that sporting bodies will probably base their decision on funding and whether they get it or not. And we're actually only talking about just over 5,500 transgender females, which is dudes, who want to be females in the entire country. And only 14% of them maybe play sport. So this is only going to affect just over 800 people. So, Peter, you're suggesting, look, this is distracting us from the bigger issues. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, the number of people involved, Bob, is minuscule in the overall situation. And those numbers that I quoted in my Substack came from the census. I think all up there are something like 26,000 people who say they are either transgender one way or the other or non-binary. I'm sorry, I don't know exactly what non-binary means, but then
nor do they.
I'm old-fashioned. But then we're also told by the transgender activists that their participation rate in sport is about half that of the general population. The general population has about 26% of us playing sport on a regular basis. That's a number I found surprisingly low. And then we're told that the transgender community are only participating at about half that rate. So therefore, you're talking 13% of the transgender population, which comes to 800 people. So, I mean, it's hardly an issue which affects a whole lot of people in this country. It's a very minor problem, but boy, it seems to make a lot of noise, doesn't it? And the Inside Out commentators and the Alice Sopers of this world, who would know that her father is Barry, the Alice Sopers of this world just make far more noise than the issue is really worth.
Okay, Rodney, do you agree? Is this a side issue or is this
Peter,
important?
I'm hoping Peter was clumsy when he said that, because he's right in that it's very few transgender athletes that are affected, but it affects everyone that plays sport. So that boy that's winning downhill mountain bike races has killed the sport, has killed women's mountain biking. Absolutely killed it stone dead. Because there were girls at the top of the game who were training hard to be the best. And he turns up and knocks them off the pedestal. That's rippled right through the sport. Because why would you compete in a sport if you can be denied an opportunity to be the best? Because it's not a playing field. It goes for every sport there is in New Zealand.
Yeah, but that's elite sport, Rodney, and we're talking about community sport here. Cycling New Zealand,
it's exactly the same in community sport.
But Cycling New Zealand should be on the case and banning that guy from taking part in women's races.
But can't.
If they had some courage, yes, they could.
They can't. I promise you they can't. If a boy turns up as a girl at our local rowing club where my girls row, they'd be in, because the club would be destroyed if they tried to exclude them. You've got
destroyed by who?
The transgender lobby and the media and the sports federations. I promise you.
Yeah.
Now we're lucky.
I mean, we've got Kiralee Smith speaking at the Forum on the Family in a month, and she's from Australia. She spoke up about the women's soccer team that had 5 biological males on it, and any club that tried to complain about that girls' team having 5 biological dudes in it, they were basically told to shut up and they would be disciplined by the sporting body. So there's this huge societal pressure on them. Look, go on, Ronnie.
And you're also right, Peter. It is about money, but here's the thing. All the corporates have been pulled off course because they've all gone to get the rainbow tick, and they're scared witless about losing it, and literally, inside out, could scare the bejesus out of a corporate in New Zealand and their sponsorship of sport by labelling them as transphobic. Now, the entire thing is, you're right, it's total nonsense. It's affecting very few sports people. The sports people aren't being denied the opportunity of doing sports. That man, he can go in any male downhill bike race he wants. No one's stopping him. But he'd prefer to pretend he wears a dress and turn up and gets a thrill at a beating woman. He's a disgusting person. And of course, we have the situation in swimming where the men are turning up in the changing rooms with these poor girls. And of course, I face this now with my daughters. And I mean, we haven't had it yet. We've had it in the changing sheds, I have to say. But we haven't had it in a competition yet. But I have no doubt that it's coming. I also believe that, unfortunately, the government's policy is window dressing, and it'll make no difference. Because
it doesn't seem to be specific enough, does it? Because it doesn't. No, it basically goes back to the sporting bodies.
It'll make absolutely no difference. And until you've felt the power of that lobby, you have no idea what you're up against.
Well, it needs courageous politicians to stare them down, doesn't it? And as we've talked many times on this show, we have a breed of politicians at the moment for whom courage is not one of their great attributes. That's why we back so much Winston Peters, because he appears to be the only one prepared to show any leadership on this issue. When Chris Bishop was the Minister of Sport, he wouldn't do anything about it. I don't think Mark Mitchell, as the current Minister of Sport, will do anything about it. Raelene Castle is just dreadful sports administrator. How she ever got that job, I don't know. And I'm just appalled that we just do not have any political courage to stare this movement down, because that's what it requires. And I'm sure that there are votes in it for some strong-willed politicians to face this issue.
Yeah, Raelene got the job because she did such a great job with Rugby Australia, Peter. That's why Australia is so good at the rugby.
Rugby league team before that, and Netball New Zealand before that, yeah.
Simon, what do you think?
Look, I'll try to keep it brief. I think courage is needed. Look, I think Winston's probably got a bit of courage, but also a bit of pragmatism. This is certainly helping him in the polls and getting some cut through. Secondly, look, I think I agree with both Peter and Rodney. I don't think we're going to see massive changes, but one positive about this is those sports administrators, whether it's at the community level or elsewhere, can no longer fall back onto the sport guidelines to justify. In other words, various parents or communities do kick up a stink, and yes, they're going to have to battle the bullying of the trans activists, which of course is their very nature. They bully them their way into girls' sports in particular, and they'll bully anyone who challenges them. But as I say, these sporting codes can no longer fall back and hide behind Sports New Zealand's guidance. I think also we can take a little bit, I want to stress the word little, a little bit of confidence of what's happening overseas in other sporting codes, which will naturally flow into New Zealand. But the last point I would make is that the guy who uses the name Kate, I thought was the absolute best advertisement for everything that is wrong with the trans agenda, because 99.9% of people could work out within a microsecond that he's a man, and pick up on his inherent contradiction that he falls back to it's community sport, while celebrating the fact that he's a champion winning high-level sports person. So the contradictions abound, and I think most Kiwis see through it, and that possibly, if I will, echoes what Peter was saying. There just needs people of courage who stand up and go, hey, we've had enough of this. And eventually, it's the only way we're going to bring change. Anyway, I need to stop again. Talk too much.
I thought it was classic that Alice Soper said that she knows what a woman is, and yet she's happy for a biological dude to play in the women's sports. Ashley, any final comment on this topic?
I sit somewhere in between the comments from Peter and Rodney. I read Peter's article and was somewhat swayed by it, and then Rodney swayed me back a little bit. The point that Peter made, which I thought was telling, was that this is only really about Sports New Zealand funding, and it only applies to sports that rely on that funding. So for well-funded sports like rugby and league and netball and cricket and other sports, this doesn't affect them at all. They make their own decisions, and Peter's absolutely right in that regard. But Rodney's 100% correct. Ultimately, there is a cartel around this. There is a public expectation that has been created, rightly or wrongly, around this mythology of men being women and therefore being able to participate in women's sports, which has terrified the administration of a lot of these sports. And the problem with this is, I think, and Rodney might want to comment on this, I suspect that if you actually went to the administrators of a lot of these smaller codes and asked them, you'd find that a lot of them would actually love to go back to the old situation that prevailed previously, where a man was a man and a woman was a woman, but they're terrified, as Rodney says, of being labelled as transphobic. I think Simon's right, though, that over the next couple of years, we're going to see that there's going to be change taking place at an international level, which is kind of going to determine where this goes. And, I have very little time for the guy, but it's one area where I think Trump's done exactly the right thing. Trump's basically drawn a line in the sand and said, this is a position that we hold, men are men, women are women. And because he's done that, it has enabled those who agree with that within the various different sporting codes in the United States to quickly fall back into line and eliminate this nonsense. So, that's what we need here. Unfortunately, that's unlikely to happen.
Okay, pretty weird, actually, because you've always polled as our most unliked panelist. But tonight, you've spoken positively of both Winston and Donald. So I think you're going to go up the ratings a little bit. I'll be interested to see
let's fix that now. Let's bring back the normal position.
I'll be interested to see the ratings. All right, team, we've got time for one more quick topic. So just a quick comment on this. I've had an application from one of my workers whose name starts with Si and ends with Connor. And he reckons that working from home is a right. Now, the public service wants everybody to come back to work, and Woke Wellington wants people back at work because all their cafes are struggling because nobody's at the office. They're all working from home with their kids and their cat and all that type of stuff. The question is, is basically working from home a right for workers? Are we going to hang on to this COVID trend, or is it time everybody got back to the office? So, Ashley, I might start with you. What do you reckon? Because I know you work from home.
Yeah, well, not only do I work from home, but I employ about 10 people, and I can tell you that it depends entirely on the people. So this idea that being in an office makes you better or more productive, in my view, is a nonsense. The people I employ, I've got a pretty enabling policy when it comes to things like hours worked and whether they work from home or in the office. We do provide an office in Wellington, and they have a mix of the two. And I can tell you that for the people I employ, productivity is not a problem. In fact, productivity is probably better than it would be in the normal workplace. So it's not about the practice. It's entirely about who you employ and whether you've got the right people in those roles.
Does it depend on the type of industry, though, Ashley?
I wouldn't have thought so. Well, if it does, the public service is one where I think you could have people work from home quite well, because, as I say, it doesn't come down to the work that they're doing. It comes down to the people that you're employing in those roles. Now, if we're going to have a conversation about whether or not the people who currently work in the public service are the right people, that's a whole different kettle of fish, and I would probably be putting the boot in. But in terms of the practice, I don't have a problem with public servants working from home. It's about the output, not the input.
Okay, and Sunny Side Up says, I must confess it helps the traffic when they work from home. Being in Auckland, that's exactly true. In fact, I look around and I think every one of you works from home. Rodney, do you think it's a right, or do you think employers have the right to say, no, get into the office?
Oh, it's entirely up to who employs you. They hire you, they buy your time. It's an open contract, and so they can dictate what you do, and they can dictate basically where you do it. So of course it is. I wouldn't mind if civil servants worked, whether they worked from home or they in the office. Just getting them to work would be a good thing in my experience. And I just had this great vision of, remember that great show, Gliding On, and the tea trolley, and wondering how that would work with a whole lot of civil servants on a Zoom call and working from home. I think the problem that you have in the civil service is monitoring performance, because you don't have a profit motive, you don't have an output, very, very hard to measure. And so they can be busy as heck in the office and causing nothing but mischief. They could be slacking off in the office and no one would know, or they could be slacking off at home and no one would know. So there's a big problem with the civil service because there's no incentive to monitor performance, none whatsoever. I think you could safely sack 50% of the civil service and you wouldn't notice.
Okay, Simon, do you think there's some sort of electricity and energy that goes around when people are in the office together and they're sharing notes and, you know, monitoring each other? It's pretty easy to sit by the fridge and play with the dog when you're working from home, isn't it?
Yeah, you must have cameras installed in my house. I'm very worried.
Yeah, here's your photo.
Look, there can be. I think it's really different courses for different horses. I think some roles work perfectly from home. You don't have to be traveling. I think some personalities, a bit like Rodney, but also what Ashley was saying, you know, when I've employed people, there are some that you just know they're getting the job done. I used to say to them, I don't care if you work 20 hours or 40, these are the outcomes that are needed for the week. And you know that. So really it's up to, as I say, the different employers and employees and what does and doesn't work. But I would just say this, there is no right to work from home. I get sick and tired of the ever-increasing narrative around rights, which really is just another word that the woke use to say, give me what I want. So just to reinforce that, there are and is no right to work from home. Very much is what Rodney and Ashley we're interested to hear what Peter says. But it's something that's negotiated, and, you know, good employees and employers can work it out.
Yeah. Peter?
Oh, indeed. Well, you have an employment contract, don't you? And the employment contract always states the place of work. We've got to remember that this particular topic only applies to those people who work at a desk with a laptop and have access to the internet. I'd suggest the vast majority of New Zealanders, not the vast majority, but the majority of New Zealanders don't work like that. When I was working in television, I could not have worked from home because the news and sports before that is very much a team effort. Everybody's required to be in the newsroom working together to put together, you know, your daily program. When I went to radio towards the latter stage of my full-time working career, could I have worked from home? Probably, if the appropriate equipment was put into my house. But if you're a builder, if you're a plumber, if you're involved in any kind of work which requires you to actually go and service people, if you're a retail worker, you can't work from home. It's only the laptop class that have the ability to work from home. And really, it comes down to the fact that the employment contract gives you, or the employment contract always should have, a place of work. And I'm old-fashioned. I believe the employer should have his staff where he or she can have some modicum of control over them. That means being there in the office. But if you're running a plumbing business or a building business or a drain laying business, there's not much point in working from home because you're not going to make much money.
That explains why my taxi driver hasn't turned up for 5 days. No wonder what.
That's the first time I've ever heard the term laptop class. There'll be laptop privilege now. I can imagine all the actions that'll come out of this. That's a whole new concept, Peter.
Yeah, no. So what he's saying is that if I want to get Simon to work, I just need to get him to do some plumbing and building, and I might actually see him show up to work. So thanks for that advice, Peter. Look, we are out of time. But one of the exciting things at the upcoming Forum on the Family at the end of next month is that we are recording a episode of Straight Talk before the live audience at the Forum. So we're pre-recording it for the following Monday. And on the panel is these three esteemed guests, because I've got Simon doing a whole lot of other donkey work for me during the day and hosting Q&As. But Rodney and Ashley and Peter are going to be on stage, along with Christine Rankin, who's going to keep the three of them in control. But that's going to be quite fun, because one thing that we can do is we can interrupt each other and actually get away with it. But you can watch that. So that's a good reason to come to the Forum on the Family, 28th and 29th of August, forumonthefamily.nz. Register now, because the places are filling up fast. Anyway, thank you, Rodney, Ashley, Peter, Simon. Great job. And thank you for watching. We will be back next Monday night for Straight Talk. Until then, have a great week.
Yeah.